Hey guys, welcome back to Kid Connect at Home. I'm so excited that you guys are joining me today because today is our Remember and Celebrate, our review lesson. So let's start off with worship before we dive into our review.
You spoke a word and brought the world to light. Your voice still echoes through the darkest night. I could try my best to count the stars. Nothing could compare to who you are. With you, everything is brought to light. With you, everything comes back to life. You died to make me whole. I want the world to know. With you, nothing is impossible. You called my name and told these bones to rise. And with the breath you brought me back to life. I could try and do it my own way. Jesus, I know only you can save. With you, everything is brought to light. With you, everything comes back to life. You died to make me whole. I want the world to know. With you, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. When the world is upside down, when I can't find solid ground, you turn it all around. Nothing is impossible. When I feel like I'm alone, when I'm far away from home, I know that I'm your own. Nothing is impossible. When my world is upside down, when I can't find solid ground, you turn it all around. Nothing is impossible. When I feel like I'm alone, when I'm far away from home, I know that I'm your own. Nothing is impossible. With you, everything is brought to light. With you, everything comes back to life. You died to make me whole. I want the world to know. With you, nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. With you, nothing is impossible. You died to make me whole. I want the world to know. With you, nothing is impossible.
All right, so for the last 5 weeks, we've been talking about some different aspects of God, and we've been talking a lot about Paul and Peter and people in the New Testament. Starting off with when Jesus went up to heaven. During lesson 1, we heard that Jesus is in heaven and he will come back for us someday. The disciples saw Jesus and they did life with him every single day. And then they even watched him go up to heaven. Remember, that was called the Ascension? We don't know what that's like. We didn't know what it was like to have Jesus just walk along next side to us. But for those who believe in Jesus, we will get to spend the rest of our lives with Jesus one day. Lesson 2, the next week, Naomi and Josie talked to us about how God's Spirit unifies. It brings us together. And how the believers left Jerusalem to take the good news about Jesus to other places. Do you remember Philip? He was sent by God to meet an Ethiopian man who worked for the Queen of Ethiopia. This Ethiopian man believed in Jesus after his conversation with Philip, and then he went home to tell others about this great news. Lesson 3 was God's Spirit Unifies Part 2. And we heard that God can give us unity with others even with people we find it hard to get along with or hard to talk to or are just different from us. For Peter, God taught him that in a dream about clean and unclean animals. Remember, God was saying, don't say something is unclean when I've said it's clean. After his dream, Peter was willing to show God's love to Cornelius, who was a Gentile. He was different from Peter, but because of God's Spirit unifying us, Peter was able to tell Cornelius about Jesus. During the next lesson, God Answers Prayer, we talked about how God answers prayer and rescued Peter from prison. An angel came and rescued him. Remember, Peter didn't know if he was dreaming or if this was really real. But then Peter went and surprised the very people who were praying for him. And at first, they didn't believe that their prayers were answered. Remember, he just kept knocking and knocking until they finally let him in. But God answers prayers even when we think it's impossible. And last week, we talked about how God speaks. God speaks to those who trust in Jesus. And last week, we heard how God spoke to Paul and his friends, and even when it didn't make sense for their journey, and even when they wanted to go to other countries, God's instructions were best. In the end, Paul got to tell Lydia about Jesus in Philippi. Remember, Lydia wasn't even from Philippi, and that's not where Paul wanted to go. But because of that, Lydia and her whole family came to believe in Jesus. And they started a really awesome church that was such a great example for other churches of what it meant to love Jesus. All of these things are how Jesus is in heaven, how God's Spirit unifies us with others, how God answers prayer, and how God speaks. These are all good reasons to be thankful. And today's lesson is about when God told Israel to be thankful. Today, we're looking at what was called the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the festivals that God commanded the Israelites to celebrate. To get started, we have to look at a book in the Old Testament called Leviticus. We're reading from chapter 23, starting in verse 33. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, on the 15th day of the 7th month, the Lord's festival of tabernacles begins, and it lasts for 7 days. After you have gathered the crops of the land, celebrate the festival to the Lord for 7 days. The first is a day of Sabbath rest, and the 8th is also a day of Sabbath rest. On the first day, you are to take branches from luxuriant trees, from palms, willows, and other leafy trees, and rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. Live in temporary shelters for 7 days, so your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt." So, just as God commanded during the Feast of Tabernacles, the people of Israel, God's chosen people, came together to set up and live in shelters. For 7 days, they lived in these tents or shelters as a reminder of the years they spent wandering in the wilderness after he brought them out of slavery and before they entered the Promised Land. You remember Moses? He brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, but they didn't always make the best choices. And for years and years and years, they wandered around in the desert before God finally let them enter the Promised Land. They rested from their work, worshiped God, and remembered how God had led them through the wilderness into the Promised Land. There are still people who are what's called observant Jews. They still observe the Jewish feasts and festivals and laws. And those people still today live in these shelters for a week to honor and remember the Feast of Tabernacles. The New Testament significance of this feast is that it reminds us that life is temporary. It's not forever. And that all of our lifelong dreams and hopes and goals and our aspirations will one day be fulfilled. They'll come true in our future home, in our inheritance with Jesus. Just like when we talked about how Jesus is in heaven, that means our goal is to get there one day. That should be our one true goal in life, is to live a life that loves and honors Jesus, and then one day we get to go be with him. This life on earth is temporary. It's not going to last forever. And that means we just have a great life to look forward to in heaven with Jesus. Just like the people of Israel used the Feast of Tabernacles to thank God for his abundant blessings, everything he had done for them, we should do the same. But we shouldn't just do it once a year like on Thanksgiving. We should do it every single day. We have so much to be thankful for in this world. Just think about the fact that you're able to watch this video right now. You can be thankful for the technology used and people in your life, like me, your parents, your grandparents, or others who give you the opportunity to help you learn more about God and his love for you. My challenge for you this week, starting today, is to find at least one thing every day to be thankful to God for. And make sure you tell him. Don't just think about it. Make sure you tell God thank you for things in your life. It could be for the chance to wake up every morning. It could be for the yummy food you're eating for breakfast or lunch or dinner. Maybe it's for a friend or a family member that you just have a great relationship with. Make it something for you to do with your family every day, maybe at a meal or bedtime, and you guys can all name something that you're thankful for. We should always remember to give thanks back to God because he created us. We wouldn't be here without him, and neither would the stuff in our lives. Remember, God created the world. We read about that in Genesis. So that means God created everything that we get to have every single day. And that is an awesome reason to be thankful. Let's finish off reviewing our remember verse from these last 5 weeks one more time. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10. So remember, be thankful, and then come back next week because we're going to jump in to even more exciting parts of the Big God story. See you guys next time.